So today I want to talk about loyalty tests and how I'm seeing them everywhere. And this particular case was a situation that really bothered me today. There are certain videos and there's certain news stories that I'll see that just ruin my day. They'll take my day from a pretty average C plus kind of day and just put them into the F category real quick. And this was one of them because it's just so obvious. There are certain times where you see stories like this, especially about cops, and you think, man, maybe there's more context here, and there's no context whatsoever that makes this okay. But it looks like this is something that happens all the time, especially with this individual. And the obvious question is always on everybody's lips. It's always the same. How does this person have this job? What happened? How does this person? It's almost odd to me that people even ask that question anymore, as if they're not paying attention. Because I guess they're not. I mean, that's really the problem is that they haven't been paying attention, because it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that the wrong people are in a position. Pick a position. And for whatever reason, that the leader of that group, the division, the department, the corporation, is the wrong guy for the job. Almost every time. It's bizarre. And it's been happening for such a long time. I remember having discussions with pretty high-end. I didn't go to law school, but I went to courses at one point with people in law school. And at one point, they were telling me about their summer vacation and how, they had to do an internship, that it was a part of their program. And, you got to pick which one you did, but you had to go and go do something. And these people went to, I don't even want to say what the companies were, but they were at a pretty high-end, big brand, big name company. And they were telling me about how they just sat there. These people are, they are very bright people. It wasn't an incredibly prestigious law school, although it is rising in the ranks lately. But these people are young, bright law students, and were not put to work at all. And when asked why, they explained that it was just a huge problem with the company, that people weren't, the people in charge were not putting anybody to work. And there were these weird fiefdoms that had been built, these castles around all of these different areas of the world within that company. And nobody could touch those projects because they were all safely guarded by minions. And they were talking a lot about how, something would go wrong, and then the entire job that everybody had at this company was to go scrambling to their emails and then just start crafting, these sort of pointing fingers at everybody else to make sure that their job was secure. And that's a company that still exists today. You would know it if I said it. And the only reason I'm not is because I don't think I'm allowed to. But it's everywhere. I mean, anybody who's been watching the news lately knows that Boeing planes are falling out of the sky. We have President Poop Pants in the White House, and President Trump recently got shot because and the director of the Secret Service wasn't going to stand down. She wasn't going to resign. She wasn't going to resign. Showed up to Congress, had to be subpoenaed to show up, by the way. Had to be subpoenaed to go and talk to Congress about what happened, and then refused to answer every question. I know because I watched it. All 4.5 hours? And it would have been a lot longer, but she just stopped. She never started answering questions. So at a certain point you go, okay, well, thanks for coming in, I guess. A lot of people were giving up the rest of their time. Forget it. What are we doing here? They kind of yell at her, and then, even that got old after a while, right? Because she just sat there stone-faced, And that conversation might have to be for another video, but the question starts to become how these people all manage to get into these positions. And the answer, in part, I think, is just the lack of community. There's just a stunning lack of community around the incompetence, the sort of almost, it seems like weaponized incompetence at a certain point, because it is so almost targeted, as if it is a goal, right? The people are being hired and rehired at other places, and that nobody ever gets sent home and has to sit down for longer than a week or two. Everybody seems to always just pop up somewhere else, and they're just fine. It's bizarre. So I'm not gonna show the whole video. Frankly, it's actually hard to get raw footage of this entire thing because, of course, you look something up, you see the original video, and then you can never find it again because every single video that YouTube tries to push is like the sanitized, safe local news segments. And of course, local news, they're so terrified of just showing the raw footage, they have to put commentary over it. I'm not blaming them for that. It's probably their audience that's the problem, who would just get bored watching something like this, even though it's like a 2-minute video. But we'll watch it on mute, and I'll just explain what happens. This is a father and son, and they're walking down an alleyway, and 2 cops approach them and treat them as if they are suspicious, that this is suspicious behavior at 6 a.m., and to them that's suspicious behavior. Of course, look at that. Look, isn't it funny? They threw that bizarre little like moment in because people will just get bored if you just show video and then comment over it or just let it play. Just let it play. You have to show these little, what are they called? Like visuals, like just these dumb things. All right. So these 2 cops approach this father and son group. They're walking down an alleyway. They decide it's suspicious and ask for his ID. They're being very aggressive, and he doesn't want to give him his ID because there's no suspicious behavior actually happening, and there's no reason for them to ask for an ID and to run anything, for that matter. They have no suspicion of actual wrongdoing. These people are on a walk. This is a father and son. He's on a walk with his kid. It happens to be early in the morning, and these 2 idiots show up. And what this cop does is he body slams this guy because he absolutely will not show what. So boom, there he goes down right in front of the kid. The kid is crying. The kid is screaming. They try to approach the kid later on. Hey, listen to me, as if they're going to tell him something, as if they're gonna show this kid that that they're actually just human beings. That's enough of that video. And of course the kid he's crying and they don't know what to do about it. So they just leave him standing there crying. I have no idea what happened after that because that's where the video cuts out. It's so obvious. It's so obvious that this is the way things are going now, where you have lunatics running the asylum. And it's a frightening thing. It's a frightening thing because if this was just the cops, at least that's a way to sort of contain it in your mind and to deal with it and say, hey, all cops are bastards, I guess, right? But this is everywhere. It's everywhere. This kind of incompetence and this maliciousness is everywhere. And it's becoming harder and harder not to see it. And the way that I would describe it is it's not just incompetence. It's not just maliciousness for its own sake. What I want to talk about today specifically is what I call loyalty tests. And these are everywhere. The reason that I started picking up on this as a kid was because if you listen to my other videos, you know that I grew up with at least one narcissistic parent. and certainly both are, I should say, mentally ill, and they would often use loyalty tests as a means of control. But it wasn't just a means of control, it was actually a check-in, right? So what is a loyalty test? What are we talking about? A loyalty test, in this case, let's just use this as an example. In this case, the loyalty test was show me your ID. That's really what it was. Because if this guy had said, sure, absolutely, sure thing, sir, absolutely, and he pulled out his ID and he showed him, and they probably would have run it, but they might not have. If you watch enough of these videos, what you'll notice is that in many cases, they don't even run the ID out of courtesy, right? They kind of tell him, like, you know what, I'm not gonna run this on you. So, of course, the obvious question is, then why the hell would you take it? What purpose does it show? Does it prove that, maybe in theory, maybe if he lives very close by and there's a street with his name on it, it makes sense. Where you go, oh, okay, you do live around here, so you really are just on a walk, maybe. But oftentimes, that's not even really what they're looking for. And so the obvious question is, well, what was the point of this? And it's because it's a loyalty test. What it proves is that you are compliant, you are submissive, and you acknowledge their power. Right? There was an academic in Germany named Hegel who used to talk a lot about the fact that what people wanted most was recognition. That was the number one thing that they wanted in life. That philosophy and understanding is true, by the way. I think that is absolutely true. The knowledge of that and the understanding of that has been used in a lot of ways that we'll have to get into in later videos, and has been a very destructive force, because that can be used against people, right? And this is true on the world stage. It's true in politics. It's true in your personal life. The desire, the overwhelming need to be recognized, whatever that means to you, is unbelievably important. And to this police officer, that's what this is about. And that's what loyalty tests are about. Ultimately, what they really are is an ultimatum. And the ultimatum says, you recognize me and what I am and what I can do and all of the things that I have power, dominion over. And in return, I will be magnanimous. That's what you often see, is in return for this, for acting accordingly with the loyalty test, I will be magnanimous. Now, the problem is the same as it always has been when it comes to sort of subjective trades. That's why we use money now. The problem with that is that value is subjective. If I'm giving you something and you give me something back and I say, well, that's not enough, it's a subjective thing, right? If all we're doing is trading gifts. That's why we sort of changed over to the money system, so that there's some baseline understanding of exactly how much I get and exactly how much you get for your services. It's something that is not subjective and then can be haggled over or bartered over. But in a lot of cases with gift giving, which was something that some native cultures in Northern and Southern America used to do, this would cause wars, right? Because if I gave you like a canoe, let's say I gave you a fleet of canoes, because that's what we made, and then you gave me in return like, I don't know, 6 pairs or something, it would be an incredible affront to not only me, but my people, to the power of the king. I mean, it would cause all of these problems. And so in a lot of cases, money as civilization sort of moves on, you get monetary value of some type, and it happens all over the world that way. And that's the problem with gifts. That's the problem with magnanimity in the case of these narcissists who commit these loyalty tests. And non-narcissists commit these loyalty tests too. We'll get into that in a second. But it's an enormous problem in this country in general. It's a major reason why a lot of what is happening now, in my opinion. And that's why I decided to use this video as a jump off point, because it is obvious, but it's also, a lot of people just they don't seem to know what's going on. They don't seem to see what's going on out there constantly every day. And it's just caused a massive amount of confusion, of confusion. So again, coming back to the magnanimity of responding to the loyalty test, that generosity might just be as stupid as I'm not going to terrorize you today. And that's what this was. And that's what in many cases police officers do to people. If you hand them your ID, what you're doing is you're saying, I understand that you have authority over me. I'm acknowledging the authority. I'm acknowledging your power over me. Please, sir, do not hurt me further today. Please, sir, you've already stepped on my rights, but that's what I'm actually doing is I'm giving you my rights. And that's what they want most of all. What they want is for you to hand them your rights willingly. And you'll see this, I see this constantly in these videos where they'll say something like, it didn't have to go this way. All you had to do was do what I say. Why didn't you? I asked you so nicely. I asked you so nicely. I was being nice. Now, of course, how aggressive they actually are in the video doesn't matter. To them, asking nicely is, I didn't go straight to violence. You're welcome. It has become an enormous problem. It has become an enormous problem. The other issue with loyalty tests, and we're going to get into some other examples of what those are in a second, is that you can never fail them. You can't fail a loyalty test with somebody who's giving one. So what does that look like? I'll give you an example of one that my mom did when we were out at a restaurant. And for some reason, I was a kid and I was there with my brother. And my brother was a very expansive person. He was somebody who was just constantly sort of stepping on everybody else. And there was everybody kind of had a hard time dealing with that and trying to control that. There was really nothing that anybody could do. But this one particular night, we were at this restaurant, and I just kept on getting interrupted to a point that it was pretty clear that it was being done on purpose. It was sort of a game to my brother, who had decided it would be funny to just make sure that I couldn't tell this story for some reason. Had nothing to do with him. He wasn't doing it because it would embarrass him or something like that. It was just another one of those moments where you're dealing with a little maniac. And I just decided, because no one was coming to my aid. It wasn't like my mom was sitting there, and it wasn't like she was telling him to shut up. It was just something that she decided was okay, and that used to happen a lot as well. And at a certain point, I just decided, forget it. It's not, I'm done. I'm done trying to tell the story. Nobody cares. My mom won't even step in and shut this guy up. And I just said, all right, well, never mind. And it turns out that my mom actually wanted to hear this story. Well, at first she's sort of laughing and saying okay, come on, it's, yeah, okay, he'll stop. He's not going to say that anymore. But I was done. I mean, this had been a long drawn out thing. And I was like, maybe I'll tell you later, but I'm done. That was a boundary that I tried to lay down with them. And then my mom decided that it was time for a loyalty test. So she started telling me to tell the story over and over and over again. And each time that she did, she got louder and louder and louder about it. To the point that by the end of this loyalty test, the entire restaurant is now staring at me. This is something that happened a lot, actually, because what I tended to find was if you were in public, it's actually quite easy to terrorize somebody else into acting or into doing what you want if you don't care about how you're looked at, and this is the important thing, and if you use a tone, especially with a child, right, that makes you sound like the adult in the room. If what you're doing is you're trying to make someone do something and they won't do it, it sounds to everybody else in the room like this is a problem child. And so now the entire restaurant is staring daggers at me because I'm interrupting their dinner. And eventually I told her just to shut her up because of the social terrorism. And that was a loyalty test. And again, you're not allowed to fail the loyalty test. That's the important. It's very important to think about because a test, right? It's almost the wrong word, almost, because in most cases tests are something you can fail, right? You sort of, especially socially, you can sort of reach out and ask someone something or suggest something to somebody and see what their response is. In this case, the reason that you're doing the loyalty test is to actually prove your power. So what you're really saying is, you are not allowed to be anything but loyal to me. And anything else will be met with violence. In this case, I have no doubt, of course, like, you know, it could have been one of those situations where I just got punished physically later if I had not told the story, the end of the story. But in reality, it's enough of a punishment in a lot of ways to just be embarrassed to tears by somebody who does not otherwise care. Right? I have other examples of that. They're sort of more personal, and most of them are really horrendous. But some of the more, that the one in the restaurant is a little bit more comfortable and not so horrifying. You know, a lot of people, if it's something that kind of made you shrug and go, I'm not really seeing it. I could escalate. I could escalate with more stories, but I'm trying to get across the idea without ruining anybody's day. What you have to understand about these loyalty tests, and what this is true whether it was my mom in the restaurant or the cop in this video, is that loyalty tests are always backed by something that the perpetrator considers a principle. In other words, and this is true of all narcissists, by the way, and it's becoming true of almost everybody I meet, and this is why I'm doing this video. When you have a set of what you consider principles, and you are willing to quote-unquote fight for those principles, there's a pretty good chance that you couldn't verbalize it if you tried. Whenever I meet somebody who says that something that they're doing is about the principle of the thing, it usually doesn't mean a whole lot. And the reason for that is that somebody who is a narcissist or has narcissistic tendencies tends to care very deeply about their sense of morality because to them, they are a good person. This is how otherwise, or I'll put it like this. This is how people who consider themselves to be good people can do outrageously evil things to others. Because it's about principle. When you make it about principle, it's not up to you what happens, right? If I can tell myself that the reason that I'm acting outrageously or that I'm stepping on somebody else's constitutional rights is because I'm a good person and I'm standing up for the principle of the thing, that can mean almost anything. If you ask this cop, like, what was the principle behind showing his ID? I think he'd probably be able to tell you something like, well, I had a reason for asking for his ID. The reason was that I wanted to run his background in the computer and see whether or not he had any warrants out for his arrest or if this person was a threat, because what I saw was a person who was suspicious. So it's the principle of the thing that he would give it to me, because if he didn't give it to me, that told me that he was guilty. Now, he couldn't actually say that. He certainly couldn't say it in court. He couldn't say it in a deposition without getting in massive amounts of trouble. But that's about something like what he would explain. If he became a little more intimate, what he might say is, it's about the principle of the thing. When I ask you for your ID, I'm doing so from a position of authority as a police officer. I am an officer of the law. I uphold the law. That's what I do. That's what I am. That is my identity. And when you say no to somebody who upholds the law, you are helping to drag down society. You're ripping society apart every time you do that. And I won't allow that. That is not something I will allow. You will obey. Because if you don't, society crumbles. And it's my job to uphold society. Right? Because that is sort of the mania that a lot of these police officers have. A lot of the mania comes from the sense of a delusion of grandeur. Right? And we're seeing this over and over and over again on the sort of massive political stage as well. Right? If you were to ask the Trump shooter, what the hell were you doing? I mean, of course, barring the obvious concerns that this was not the real shooter, that I think his name was Crooks, that Crooks was a patsy, or that there was some kind of MK Ultra program, or that he was a Fed or something like that, whatever. You know, let's just assume that he was a guy that just went nuts and he had to do something, right? What was he acting on but a sense of principle? This was, if you're going to kill someone like Donald Trump, it's probably not because you're a mad person who's just Daffy Ducking his whole life, right? Who's just a Looney Tune. You probably are looking in the mirror and telling yourself that you're standing up for something, that you're doing something important, that if no one else is going to do it, you're going to do what everybody else can't do. And it's the principle of the thing, don't you understand? This is a Nazi. This is Hitler. This is the ultimate morality question. If you could kill Hitler, would you? And Crooks said, yes, I will. I would. Mm-hmm. Now, was he right to do so? No, of course not. Did he have good information? No. Did it sound like he was a lunatic who just kind of believed, interestingly, in mainstream media narratives? Yeah. But that doesn't matter anymore. People have lost anchor to almost all things but themselves. We are all we are all just this sad island unto ourselves. And this, again, I cannot stress this enough. This is why I'm making this video. There was a time when I expected this kind of behavior from narcissists like my parents only. You would see it every once in a while, you would see it occasionally, and then you know what usually healthy people do is they apologize. We all have the sort of narcissistic traits, and we all do things that narcissists do, but we don't, we usually don't make them into sort of permanent facets of our life. But that's what is happening now. That is what I am seeing, and I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing it everywhere. The people who insisted, by the way, on the vaccine masks for so long after we had not only realized that maybe that they didn't have as much usefulness as we thought they did, that was also a loyalty test, was it not? Because ultimately, if you're still insisting, like 2 years after COVID's mostly gone, that everybody wears a mask inside, that's a loyalty test. That's something that you're doing because you believe that there's a principle at stake. And by the way, the principle is a good one, but the principle is almost always a good one, by the way. Whether you're a narcissist or otherwise, the principle almost always starts out as a good thing in and of itself that you think you're defending. But the reality is that it becomes perverted when you do it because you're broken-headed. If it's almost like we're all sort of machines, right? And input and output is going to be different based on who you are, and what you are inside. So if I'm a good machine, if I'm somebody who is whole inside and healthy, whatever you input into me, the output is going to become a good. But if I'm broken inside, which, let's face it, most of us are in this country at this point, and there's any kind of input, good or bad, it will come out as rotten as you are inside. That's all that really happens. So this is the danger of principle, by the way. This is why, whenever you hear people complain about like the Catholic Church, religion, things like that, you'll always hear the same sort of complaint. I hate religion. Can't stand it. And usually there's a story, right? There's a story about their childhood, something happened, or they were treated badly. They were just treated like crap when they were a kid over some sense of dogma or something like that they wouldn't believe, or they didn't like going to church or something like that. And that's also often the result of people adhering to principles, good and bad. But let's just say, even if it was the best kind of principle, like a good principle would be that you should love the Lord your God, right? But if that's filtered through a piece of crap, what that becomes is you will worship as I worship, every time, all the time, on the dot, and when I demand it. And if you dare to argue with me about a point of dogma, you will be punished severely, because that is the will of God. Right? I mean, that's how it happens all the time. Black Lives Matter. Let's use that as an example as well. Black Lives Matter was a loyalty test too. Because the loyalty test there was that, the principle was good. The principle was good. Effectively all it was really saying was we need to really start paying attention in a way that we haven't been to minority communities and how they're policed by institutions like local police departments, the FBI, the CIA even, as it turns out. We need to become aware of those things. A good principle. We all deserve equal treatment under the law, and from what we were seeing and what we have learned recently, it seems mostly, a lot of stories have come to light that show, you know what, actually, We weren't being treated equally under the law. That's not what was happening. Fine. Good. But at a certain point, the term itself, Black Lives Matter, did become a loyalty test, did it not? That's what people were saying. It was effectively an amen, I believe. Black Lives Matter started meaning all kinds of other stuff. So if you didn't believe in completely and totally tearing down police departments forever, then you effectively were out. That's not good enough, right? And with a lot of these, by the way, a lot of these loyalty tests, it seems to me, tend to be on the left side. Now that I think, my examples so far were all on the left. You have the Trump shooter. That was, by the way, in a sense, of loyalty test, was it not? The ultimate one, in a sense. Donald Trump, the negotiation at that point, or I should say, there should be a word for that, non-negotiation. Sort of like non-midi, but for negotiation. Is you will stop being a tyrant and a Hitler, or I'll kill you. Because again, you're not allowed to fail the loyalty test, right? So if you're not going to submit to me, I will punish you. And that's how that happened. The vaccine masks, that was something that you largely saw on the left. That was not generally something that you saw from the right. Black Lives Matter. If there is a version that you get from the right, it is these cops. It's if anything, it's not. Again, I'm not saying that that the left is the reason for all of our woes. Certainly, the name of my channel is there for a reason. But that it seems like the sort of political loyalty tests are coming from the left, generally speaking, and that sort of more personal, individual ones come from the right. Although you could, again, suggest that this cop was coming from a political loyalty test, in the sense that, he believed that he was defending society, right, and the crumbling thereof. There's something there. So let's. I don't want to drone on and on and on and on today about this, but let's just talk about for a second, what does this mean? What do you get when you have nothing but loyalty tests all over the place? And you get what we've gotten. You get incompetence, right? Because there seems to be just a severe level of incompetence on almost every front. Whether you're... I really try to stay away from the world as much as I can at this point because of this. It's just severe incompetence, whether you're talking to a corporate body or even just a private business, a mom and pop store. You turn on the news and Joe Biden is having panic attacks and making bizarre speeches and no one knows what he's talking about. The mainstream media has become completely useless. Completely useless. There's really nowhere you can turn. I was talking a little before, not only about Joe Biden, but Boeing. The planes are falling out of the sky. Things aren't functional anymore. Right? Corporations are underpaying people to the point that almost, average people are now going on welfare because they can't make ends meet. There's no reason for that. There's no, we can talk all we want and make silly little points about the economy and how to fix it and how to make things more affordable, sure, but in the end, there's got to be, we really do have to start talking about things in terms of results rather than possibilities. And you get this sort of severe incompetence when you have all these loyalty tests because those are the only ones left. Everybody else kind of leaves, right? The only way to deal with a narcissist who conducts these loyalty tests is to go no contact. And that's what ends up happening with people on a societal level or on a personal level, is you just end up going no contact. So there's plenty of people out there who, if they could be involved in the world today, if they could be involved in the world, and it's a relatively healthy place and everything's okay, they would. But there's only so many places left like that, where you can have a job that pays you well, that gives you something to look forward to, that's a job that's decent and lets you do your job right. And the reality is that the people in charge are not allowing people to do their job right. There's a reason why a lot of people are talking about early retirement, or just trying to find places. I know a lot of people who are attempting to find a way to sort of scurry into a basement somewhere and disappear. Right? To ride out the rest of their life. I'll get paid, I'll do the bare minimum, I'll show up at the Zoom meetings, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm done. I'm done dealing with these people. And the only people, look, again, that's the reality, is that you either get those people and they either find a way to do that or they leave. I was talking to a guy, I was at the gun store a few years ago. As you guys know, my mainline hobby is firearms, and I go pretty often. And I was talking to a guy at the gun store who had a contact at the ATF, and he was telling me that she had finally, she was like a 30-year veteran or something like that, and she was finally leaving, and she had told him that she cannot do it anymore. She cannot sit around and deal with these people. And she's at the top. This isn't somebody who was, who had just joined up for a paycheck. This was somebody who'd been there for a long time. And for her, the incompetence had gotten so bad that she was leaving. So, he was on this phone call with her. She was kind of on speed dial for questions about the legality of certain firearms, and she told him, like, go ahead and call me after this is my number, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to answer these questions from inside the ATF, because it's over. I'm out. I'm retiring. So who do you get left? Well, it's the people who are willing to put up with these loyalty tests, right? It's the people who submit. And when you constantly submit, when you have a lack of discussion, a lack of competition, a lack of competing ideas, what do you think happens? It's always the same. When people just keep saying yes to maniacs, this is what you get. You get planes falling out of the sky. You get trains getting derailed and blowing up for no reason. You get presidents embarrassing themselves on the world stage. You get wars everywhere, seemingly everywhere. And the only people who seem to be making it at this point are the maniacs who caused the problem in the first place, because they will, there's no end to the loyalty tests. That's something that's very important to understand. It's not like the loyalty test happens and then you can sort of wipe your brow because it's over and you did it and you made it. No, it never ends. It never stops. Because the maniac who does the loyalty test is doing it because they themselves know inside. They know how useless they are. They know how rotten they are. But they feel like if they can control things, if they can control today, if they can micromanage, let's call it micromanaging moment to moment, they're going to be okay, because you can lie your way through that. If you're in control of the narrative, then you don't have to deal with what's inside, because the real narrative is too frightening to them to deal with. That's what this cop was doing. The real narrative is that this is a very weak man. Whether that's his fault or not, it's certainly, his actions are certainly his fault. But maybe, who knows, maybe he was abused or something like that. But now he's unwilling to deal with the weakness inside. And instead of facing it head on in the mirror, he's going to micromanage his way through every situation, and he won't stop. It's mania. He will not stop, ever. The only thing that stops somebody like this is you fire him. You get him out of there, and you make him sit down. And from what I understand, I haven't looked into this too heavily, but this police officer was, in fact, fired, or at least, let's call it transferred, from one department to another for problems that happened before this. And that's almost always the case as well. It's so common. This is what happens when you have people who conduct loyalty tests like this. Because people like this see themselves in other people like this cop. And they realize, if, loyalty test is always going to happen from superior to inferior, right? You can't do the loyalty test if you don't have power over somebody. So what they realize is this is somebody who will conduct their own loyalty tests to people, sure. But that kind of person understands that in order to maintain their pretend control over their own situation, they've got to answer to me. They've got to pretend like they're in control. And what that often means, ironically, to a lot of narcissists is if you have a superior that you can't overtake, at least not today, not in this moment, you'll do what they say, and you will submit to the loyalty tests that you are given, maniacally, waiting for that moment that you can shrug off that burden. And it's rotten. It's all rotten to the core. And then that person, effectively, that's how you get these organizations where that superior retires, and who's the next guy? Who's the guy standing in line behind him to take over? It's the guy who's been taking those loyalty tests and passing. So what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do in the face of that? And ultimately, the unfortunate conclusion to this video is that there really is nothing you can do in the face of a society built upon loyalty tests. Just like there's nothing that you can do in the face of people who commit the loyalty tests, who perpetrate the loyalty tests. There's no way to fix it. That person is a maniac, and you just have to get away from them. And we're going to be talking about that in another video. I've been going for too long as it is, but it is time to get away from these people. It is time to get away from everybody. There is no society left. I hate saying that. I was an enormous believer in society for a very long time. I believed in it. I believed in the possibilities of it. I believed in what it meant and what it could mean to people and in the way that it could change people's lives. It sounds very stupid to say that now, especially in 2024, but I really believe that there was something holy about society, about culture, when it was done right, when it was done well. And whatever we had and whether or not we ever had a sort of holy society or a good, even just like a decent society, we don't have that now. The maniacs are in charge. Get away from them. Do everything that you can to step away and to isolate yourself from the maniacs. And try to find like-minded people who feel this way and create community with them. That's really all you can do. Because cops like this have trouble in neighborhoods who look out for each other. This police officer was able to do this because I think the police department was Watonga. Whenever I see videos like this, my question is always, where is the community of Watonga? And there is none. It's probably too big a city. It's probably too big a city. And if there are communities in there, he probably doesn't go there. Primarily because he doesn't need to. Right? If you're not in a crappy neighborhood, the cops, generally speaking, don't go to your neighborhood. There's no reason to. So get to know your neighbor. It's really, there's only so much you can do, but you have to do things like get to know your neighbors, have block parties, get guns and take care of yourselves, protect yourselves. Cops like this would have a much harder time assaulting people and hurting people in places that said, hey, Bill, you okay over there? What's going on when this happened? It'd be a lot more difficult.